Welcome to an all-new series from LambdaTest on Selenium with C# and MSTest Framework. In this all-new series, we are going to be talking about what MSTest Framework is and how to get started with it. How to write super simple code with MSTest Framework and Selenium. How to write parallel test for Selenium code using MSTest Framework. And finally, we'll be running the same parallel testing code with the Lambda testing platform for cross-browser testing and cross-platform, and also running the locally hosted application within LambdaTest platform. So this series is an to-the-point series covering all the important topics required for anyone to start using MSTest Framework. Well, as that said, in this video we'll be talking about MSTest introduction and installation. So what is MSTest Framework? MSTest is the Microsoft test framework for all .NET language. It's extendable and works for both .NET CLI and Visual Studio IDE. Like other test frameworks such as NUnit and XUnit, MSTest also has all the rich test framework functionality which is required for performing testing of our application. It can be an unit test, it can be an UI-based test such as Selenium. It has all the rich functionalities which is required for performing a test operation. And there are many advantages MSTest has. Something like MSTest Framework has the data-driven capability as well as custom attribute capability, which can be helpful for us to write custom attributes as well as running the test via data-driven testing using CSV file, JSON file, or Excel file, or even data sources like SQL Server databases. And MSTest can run the test in both IDE as well as CLI in both parallel and sequence operations. And MSTest is a .NET Core compatible framework, meaning it can run on Windows, Mac, and Linux operating system without any problem. And using MSTest's test context, it's easy to get the current state of test execution and reporting directories and even more functionalities which is required to perform test operation to get the current state of the test, which is used for the reporting purpose mostly. Well, as that said, MSTest has got a super simple structure very much close to the other testing frameworks such as NUnit and XUnit, something like this. As we can see here, MSTest has got the test class attribute, which is decorated for the class, and has got the TestInitialize attribute, which is mainly used to initialize the drivers or database or any file systems. And there is the TestMethod attribute, which is used to perform test operation of our code. It can be a Selenium test, it can be an unit test, or it can be an integration test. And then the TestCleanUp attributes is used to perform the cleanup of driver or database or the file system IO operations once the testing is completed. So this is the basic structure of the MSTest framework, which is pretty close to NUnit and XUnit frameworks. Well, as that said, the setup and prerequisite of the MSTest is quite easy and quite simple because MSTest come along with Visual Studio IDE and it's a default test framework. Hence, installing Visual Studio 2017 or above will have MSTest template by default. And we are going to add Selenium reference within our code so that we can start writing the Selenium code starting our next video. Well, as that said, this is the super simple setup and prerequisite. We'll start creating a simple MSTest project in this video and we'll see how the project is going to look like. So we have Visual Studio 2019 installed within our machine and we're going to start creating the first project of our MSTest. So for doing that, first click this create a new project, which is going to show you all the different project templates available within your Visual Studio. And you can see that the recent project template shows me the MSTest project with .NET Core. But we can also search the MSTest framework from here, which is going to bring us the MSTest project for .NET Core. It is available in C#, VB, and F#, but the one which we are going to be choosing is the C# language binding. So we're going to select this, we're going to hit next, and then we can give a name here. And we're going to hit this create. And since this is a .NET Core compatible project, it is going to have all the dependencies required to run .NET Core based test for Windows, Mac, and Linux operating system. And as we can see here within our Solution Explorer, it's going to resolve the dependencies for us automatically. And it's going to have the Microsoft.NET.Test.SDK, MSTest.TestAdapter, and MSTest.framework. And it automatically discovers the test within our text explorer because that is the nature of MSTest. Something like this. And within our MSTest project, you can see that it will have the unit test1.cs file, which is going to have the test class attribute decorated for the unit test1 class. And it has got a test method for the test method that we are going to be running within our code. So the simple code, if we try to write something like console.writeLine, and if we try to run this test, it's going to run the test for us and it's going to show us the output over here. So this test framework, the MSTest framework, is going to look pretty much exactly same like how it works for other testing frameworks. In our next video, we'll see how we can actually start writing the Selenium code to run a browser-based test using MSTest framework. Welcome to our next video for Selenium C# with MSTest framework in our LambdaTest video series. And in this video, we'll be talking about how we can write a super simple Selenium test using MSTest framework. In our last video, we created a simple MSTest project using the MSTest.NET Core project template of Visual Studio 2019. And in this video, we'll be seeing how we can start writing the code within Selenium C#. So for adding a Selenium dependency, we are going to be right-clicking this packages and we'll be adding a NuGet package where we can search for Selenium. So once we search for Selenium, we get the Selenium WebDriver over here. So let's try to install the Selenium WebDriver and this will add the dependency for us. And at the same time, since we'll be using different browsers, for instance, for this demonstration, we'll be using the Chrome browser, we need to install the Chrome driver as well. So we'll be installing this Chrome driver alongside so that we can invoke the Chrome browser within our Selenium test that we'll be executing. And once these two dependencies are added, we're pretty good to go with writing the Selenium test on this test method. So the code that we'll be writing this time for Selenium test is going to be available mostly in our LambdaTest GitHub repo. So if you search for any project related to Selenium C#, let's say Selenium C#, you can get into the C# NUnit Selenium or NUnit Selenium sample. So if you go to any of our project and if you just go to the project and any of our test, you will find a lot of tests which is going to be related to one of the application that we will be using prevalently for testing and showcasing a demo. So we'll be using the same application this time as well to see how we can automate the application. And you can see that the application is going to be the lambdatest.github.io sample to do app. So I'll be using the same application to automate and we'll be copy pasting some of the codes from here. So to start writing the Selenium test, the first thing that we need to do is to create the iWebDriver of driver, which can be accessible from the global scope. And because this iWebDriver needed to be added a reference, we'll be adding by using the control dot of Visual Studio shortcut. And then we'll be using this openqa.selenium to add the Selenium dependency. And once we have this dependency, then we can start writing the code. So the first code that we'll be doing is opening a new Chrome browser or the Chrome driver to start playing with the driver that we'll be using. So I'm going to be adding the dependency using the openqa.selenium.chrome, and this will add the Chrome dependency for us. And then we need to navigate to the website using the go-to URL of the application that we just saw, which is going to be this one. So we can just copy this and we can paste it over here. And then we can start writing the rest of the code, which is going to be clicking the checkboxes and adding the button and things, which is going to be something like this. So this is the way that we can write a super simple code of Selenium, which is going to start performing the operation for us. So let's try to run this code and see how this code is actually going to be working for us. So I'm just going to right click this test method, and once I hit this run, it is going to start invoking a Chrome browser for us, and then it is going to run the test for us as well. So as you can see, it has opened a browser for us, and then it has completed the full test execution successfully. But with the MSTest framework, we can do a lot more thing. As you can see, once the test has been executed, the browser was not closed, which means the driver was not quit after the test execution, which we can do using the TestCleanUp attribute of MSTest Framework to do it for us. So we can just call this public void cleanup or any method name of your choice, and then we can just do driver.quit to quit the browser for us. And in fact, we can do even more things. For example, if we want to have the Chrome driver in the TestInitialize, we can move from the test and then we can write the TestInitialize attribute of MSTest Framework to do it for us. So we can just call it as initialize and we can copy paste the code over here. So you can see that the initialization is going to be initializing the driver for us, and the cleanup is going to quit the driver for us, and this test method is going to be responsible just for executing the test for us. So let's try to run this test once again and we'll see how the test is going to be behaving for us. And as you can see, the browser has been opened and it also got quit once the test cleanup is being called and the test has been successfully completed. So this way we can easily run Selenium test using MSTest Framework of Selenium using Selenium C#. In our next video, we'll see how we can extend this operation to run a parallel test execution using MSTest Framework and using Selenium's remote WebDriver. Thank you. Hi there and welcome back to another video of our Selenium C# with MSTest Framework in our LambdaTest platform series. And in this video, we're going to talk about how we can run a parallel cross-browser testing with Selenium C# and MSTest Framework. In our last video, we discussed how we can write a simple code with Selenium C# with MSTest Framework, something like this. And we didn't really saw how we can actually leverage the power of parallel execution or running the cross-browser testing with MSTest Framework. And in this video, we are going to see how we can do all of them using Selenium C#'s Selenium Grid setup. So in order to achieve the parallel testing as well as the cross-browser testing, we are going to create a new class file in our project, and we're going to call this as WebDriver init. And within this class file, we are going to perform like a driver initialization and like a browser option initialization as well as an enum, which is going to be looking something like this. So this is the enum, the browser type enum that we are going to be using this time to set the browser type for us. And then we are going to be creating the browser option method, which is going to look something like this. So within this browser option, you can see that we have used the browser type as a parameter, and also we did a switch case to get the browser options such as Chromium options or Firefox option or Edge options or Safari options over here. So we need to add the reference for all of them because Visual Studio is complaining us that these references are not there in this particular class file. So we need to add them all. And you can see that this is the get browser option. So this browser option method is going to basically return as the browser option that we are looking for within our method that we are going to be writing over here. So we are going to write a method something like public iWebDriver. So let me add this reference, and then we're going to call this as get WebDriver. So this get WebDriver method is also going to accept the browser type as a parameter, and then it is going to expect us to have the capabilities which is then being required for our remote WebDriver of Selenium. So we need to set the capabilities over here using this get browser options that we have just created over here. So now that we have this particular capability, and now we need to call our remote WebDriver to hook with our Selenium Grid setup. I already have the Selenium Grid setup over here. It's already running the server, and it's also running 2 nodes for us, which has these capabilities as you can see over here. It has one node with Internet Explorer, Firefox, and Chrome browser running, and another node which has Firefox IE, Edge browser, as well as the Chrome browser. So it has other capabilities in this, and because we have the limitation that this is an Windows operating system and I can't really run the Safari browser in it, and also I cannot run multiple versions of browsers in my machine. If I need to, then probably I need to run a different node in a different machine which has a different versions of browsers in it. But at the moment within my machine, those are limitations and I can't really do that. Well, you got the point right now that this is the setup that I have got in my Selenium grid setup, and I can use this capabilities to run my cross-browser testing. Also, we can perform the parallel browser testing. So now we have everything, and now we need to write a bit of code to connect with the remote WebDriver, and the code is going to look something like this. And as usual, this is a normal Selenium grid setup where we have a remote WebDriver and we have passed the new URI of the local Selenium grid, and we have passed the capability that we have obtained from the get browser options method. And again, it's going to return us a dynamic browser options, so we can keep extending regardless of its type. So it's all sitting in over here, and then we are going to be using the same LambdaTest.github.io sample to do app that we used in our earlier video of this series. As you can see that this is the simple setup that we have for the get WebDriver, and because we already have the WebDriver option which has the capabilities being set and everything, we don't necessarily require this TestInitialize to do it for us. Rather, we can do it from the easiest way within our code using the using keyword of C#, where we can create a disposable object in the using keyword. So I'm just gonna type this get WebDriver, and you can see that we get this particular error because this WebDriver doesn't really exist. The reason being, this particular WebDriver get WebDriver method is actually sitting in the WebDriver init class. So we need to inherit the WebDriver init class so that we get this get WebDriver over here. And now that we get this get WebDriver, but we need to pass the browser type here. We can do it in two ways. Either we can just hardcode the browser type, something like Chrome like this, and we can probably close the parenthesis over here and it looks okay. But if you want to use different browsers like Firefox browser, then I need to either create a separate method to do that, something like this, and we can call this as TestMethod 2, and here we can call this as Firefox, or we can also use the data-driven way of MSTest Framework to leverage that for us. So let's try to run a simple code just with this setup, like the Chrome and with the Firefox, using two different methods, and then we'll see how we can run them using a data-driven setup method. So we are going to choose these two test methods, and then we are going to be executing them right now, and they are going to be running the test in sequential mode this time. And as you can see, it has opened the Chrome browser and it has just got failed, which is all right. And then it has opened the Firefox browser and it's running the test, and it's going to fail as well. The reason it's failing is because it doesn't really have this driver.quit method, because we don't really have a driver initialization happening at the moment. So this particular driver variable is kind of obsolete, and we don't really require that within our test method itself. And since this driver is being disposed within this particular using block itself, we can do the driver.quit over here itself. So which will actually quit the driver or nothing but the browser for us, and then the test will automatically pass if we do this. And we can remove this TestCleanUp as well. So now that you can see that we have made our code even more super simplified, and if we try to run these tests, it will run fine without any problem. But now the next question comes is how that we can actually run the same test using the data-driven way, so that we can control all the browsers in one single place instead of creating two different methods. And that's the reason we are going to be using their data-driven approach of MSTest using the data row attribute. So this data row attribute can actually get any number of parameters which we can pass in, something like browser type.chrome, and similarly I can create something like data row browser type.edge, something like this. So once these changes are made, we also need to change the browser type that we have hard-coded here on the get WebDriver. And this one we can do using this browser type being as a parameter within this test method, and we can use this browser type as a parameter for the get WebDriver method. So this way it is going to be much easier to handle the two browser running for us over here instead of just one browser. So let's try to run the same code right now using a data-driven testing instead of the hard-coded browser type that we did. And once we run this test of the test method 1, it is going to launch the two browser, like the Edge Chrome browser and the Chrome browser for us, and completes the test execution for us. So this way we could see that it is launching the two browser for us over here. The last quest is to run the test not only just in cross-browser testing, but also in parallel execution testing. And this parallel execution in MSTest is also much easier to be done, which is pretty much like the Selenium way of doing it. Again, we discussed about NUnit parallel execution in our LambdaTest series, as well as in SpecFlow series, we discussed about how we can run the parallel execution. That's exactly the same idea being used in the MSTest framework as well. All we need to do is we need to call the assembly over here, and then we're going to call this parallelize attribute where we can actually pass the workers here. So in this MSTest framework, there is something called as workers, which actually helps you to set number of workers that you need to be calling to run your codes in parallel execution. You can set the workers as 0 or 1, like depends on how many instances that you want to execute. And then you can set the scope to the execution scope of the levels in the method level or in the class level. And because we only have one class and we have multiple methods, we can use this method level, which can do that trick for us. So this way, this particular code is actually going to be executing in parallel execution this time. And now while we try to run this test, you could see that both these tests are now running in parallel for us, and they have completed execution pretty much on the same time. So now that you can see that the total duration of the execution was 30 seconds while we set the worker threads to 0. But if we try increasing the worker threads to 1, you could see that our test execution is going to be a bit faster than it is actually, because it is going to spawn a number of threads for us, and the execution is going to be actually faster than its usual time frame. So you could see that the total time for this particular test is actually 21 seconds of duration instead of 30 seconds of duration. So the number of workers that we increase, it is going to increase the speed of our test execution. So this is the way that we could actually run the parallel execution in MSTest framework using Selenium C#. But in our next video, we'll discuss how we can leverage the power of LambdaTest platform to perform the same parallel execution operation, but not limiting to just one browser versions or one platform like an operating system, rather using multiple different operating systems, multiple different browsers, and multiple different browser versions, which we'll be discussing in our next video. Hi there, and welcome back to our next video on Selenium with C# and MSTest framework in LambdaTest series. And in this video, I'll be discussing about how we can run the Selenium C# with MSTest framework test in the LambdaTest platform. So far we have been discussing about what is MSTest framework and how to create and set up MSTest framework in Visual Studio. And we also discussed how to run Selenium UI test with MSTest framework in the local machine, and running the parallel Selenium UI test with MSTest framework with cross-browser in the local grid setup. While we were discussing all these things in our earlier videos, we also saw there were some limitations while running the test in the local grid setup. Well, the limitations are pretty evident, and the reason being the Selenium grid setup needs to be always up and running and should have all the browsers and browser versions and operating system combinations in our infrastructure, and the cost in setting up those infrastructure are really higher, because all these browsers and the operating systems and their availability as well as maintaining different nodes is always a complex and challenging job. But in order to avoid these limitations, we need to get into a platform which can really make these things much easier and sophisticated. So hence, welcome to LambdaTest platform. Well, LambdaTest Selenium Automation Grid enables us to perform the end-to-end automation test on a secure, reliable, and scalable Selenium infrastructure. We can perform automated cross-browser testing with Selenium scripts on 2000 plus browsers and operating systems environment. We can also perform automated cross-browser testing of a locally hosted web application using LambdaTest tunneling. So these are some of the ways that we can improve our automated testings in a much easier fashion using LambdaTest platform. And this also resolves the limitations that we have to maintain the infrastructure by ourselves. Well, as that said, what are we going to discuss in this particular video to make these things happen? Well, we are going to be discussing a lot of things in this video. Especially, we're going to discuss how to configure LambdaTest platform integration in the local Selenium code that we wrote in our earlier videos, and how to run parallel Selenium grid setup in the LambdaTest Selenium automation grid, and how to perform cross-platform and cross-browser testing with LambdaTest, and how to run locally hosted application in LambdaTest platform via Lambda tunneling. So these are the things that we'll be discussing in this particular video. So let's get started. So this is the code that we have been writing in all these days in our earlier videos. But today we are going to enhance this code to run on the LambdaTest platform. But before starting to really work with the LambdaTest platform, let's quickly look at how the LambdaTest platform itself is going to look like. Well, this is the LambdaTest platform that we are going to be using to perform running the cross-browser testing with 2000 plus browser combinations. And as you can see within this LambdaTest platform, we have a nice little dashboard. It shows all the details of the concurrent tests that we can execute, and how many tests is totally been executed, and how many real-time tests been executed, how many screenshot test has been executed, and responsive test has been executed in this particular time frame. And also we can leverage the power of the automated testing that we are going to be doing in this particular video to connect our existing Selenium test and run that within the LambdaTest Selenium grid setup. So as you can see within this automation tab, you have something called as get started and run in cloud. So if you click this get started, you get all the details to configure your test code with LambdaTest platform. It gives you what host URL that you should be using, and what is the username that you should be using, and what is the access key. And these are the details, something which is available as an example here with the desired capabilities that you can use to set up all the details like the platform, browser name, versions, resolutions, network, visual, video, and things of that nature. So these are the details required for your test to connect with the LambdaTest platform itself. And the most important three things that we really need to have in place are the hub URL, the username, and the access key. So once we have these details, we could able to connect with the LambdaTest platform from our code. So I'm just going to quickly start doing that with our existing code, but just that we are going to add a lot of additional capabilities this time. So if we get to our code with our WebDriver init.cs file, you could see that we actually have not really used any capabilities so far. All we have did in our earlier videos were just to get the browser options, but we have not really did any capabilities itself. And also we can note here that we only have passed the browser type so far within our get WebDriver. The reason being our machine is limited to just one operating system, which is Windows operating system, and only the browser that we can pass in, but not the versions of the browser that we can test. Because if we need to test with multiple browsers, then we need to have those multiple browsers installed within the same machine, which we can't really do until we uninstall the earlier versions from our machine. But now with the power of LambdaTest, we can really achieve all these things. Well, as that said, our parameters are now going to be a bit changed this time than compared to what we have been passing these days. Within this get WebDriver, we are going to start passing in some more additional details like the platform, versions, and names within it. And it's going to look something like this. So we have this browser type, platform, versions, and names. So once we have this platform, versions, and name, we need to then add the additional capabilities within this method, which is going to look something like this. And as you can see, it's going to have additional capabilities to accept the platform, versions, name, build, users, and the access key. So this user and the access keys are something that we are going to be getting from our LambdaTest platform itself, which are nothing but these two. So we are going to pass these two details within our constructor somewhere within this particular class so that we can start using it. And it's going to look something like this. So now we have everything that is required for our browser options as a capability, and all we need to do is to replace our local Selenium grid setup to the LambdaTest connectivity so that we can connect to our LambdaTest platform itself, and it's going to look something like this. And as you can see, it has the HTTPS because it's a secured socket layer, and it is going to be connecting with the username and password that we have passed, and at hub.lambdatest.com/wd/hub. So instead of the local Selenium WebDriver, we are now connecting to the remote Selenium WebDriver, which is nothing but the remote LambdaTest Selenium grid setup. So we have all these details right now, which means we are now pretty much good to go, but just that we get some errors from where we are calling this particular method because we need to pass those additional parameter within themselves because it's not passed so far. In order to do so, we are actually going to add these additional parameters as well within our test method, something like this. But as you would imagine, these parameters like platform, versions, and name have not been passed within our data row so far. And without this, the test is not really going to be executing. In order to execute that, we are going to pass some additional informations like Windows 10 operating system, run the version of browser as 89, and run the Chrome test for us, something like that. And once we have all these details, we also need to pass those parameters within the get WebDriver. And that's exactly the same thing we need to do for our other test method, which is going to be something like this. And we also need to pass the parameters for this particular test method, and we can pass the data row for this particular test as well. So now that we have all those details over here, let's try to build this whole solution, and we can see if we could execute this particular test on the LambdaTest platform. So in order to do that, I'm just going to select both the test methods, and then I'm just going to hit the run. So once we run this test this time, these tests are going to start executing within the LambdaTest platform instantly because now it is being connected with the LambdaTest platform itself. So as you can see, once I execute this test, it is automatically starting this parallel browser testing for us over here, and it says new data is available, and it says 2 concurrent tests are running. And once I click this parallel browser testing, it is showing us the Chrome test and the Edge test for us. And it's also showing one more new data coming in, and it shows all the data which are coming up for us over here. It is running the test on the Mac operating system in the Mac OS Catalina for the Chrome browser. It's also running on the Windows 10 for the Firefox browser and for the Chrome browser and Edge Chrome browser. So it's running on different versions of these browsers in different operating systems just instantly by running all of them in parallel. So if we click this play button, it is also going to show us the complete test being executed on these operating system instantly from the LambdaTest platform. So this eliminates a lot of pains that we had with because all the heavy lifting is being covered by the LambdaTest platform. So this way we could see that we could able to run the cross-browser, cross-platform testing in parallel using MSTest Framework in Selenium C# with the power of LambdaTest platform. The last option that we'll be discussing is the LambdaTest platform's tunneling option. So using this tunneling option, we can run our local test within the LambdaTest platform instead of running all the remote tests that we have been executing all these days. So if you see, instead of running the publicly hosted application that we have been testing all these days, we have this application lambdatest.github.io sample to do app, and this application is actually hosted on a publicly hosted domain, but we have to replace this to run our locally hosted application. We actually have this application running within our local machine, which is going to be this one. So if I click this, it's going to take us to this to-do HTML, and this is something coming from the 127.0.0.1 8080 of todo.html. So this is basically my local application running within my local machine, and we are going to be executing this application within the LambdaTest platform. And this can be achieved using the LambdaTest's tunneling option. which we can actually find from the LambdaTest over here. So if you go to the LambdaTest platform, we have something called as configure tunnel options right here. So once we click that, it gives us an option to execute this tunneling within a special binary which we can download from here. So once we download this binary, it is going to extract it and it's going to show us the lt.exe file, and this exe file can be executed using this command that is given over here. So we can just copy this command and then we can start executing it within that particular binary that we have got. So in order to do that, I'm just going to navigate to the location where I have downloaded LambdaTest tunnel application, and I'm going to paste the command that I'm going to be copying from here. And once we run this, you could see that it is going to start a tunneling option for us, something like launching tunnel. And once the tunnel is being launched, we can then see that it is going to be displayed as over here. If we refresh our page, like tunnel is active, which means now we can run our locally hosted application within the LambdaTest platform. But we also need to make a simple code change within our Selenium test so that we can tell that this is the capability that we need to be using to run our locally running test to use the locally hosted application, which we can do using a capability called as tunnel. So using this tunnel capability, we could tell our Selenium grid, which is nothing but the LambdaTest Selenium grid, to actually use the capability of tunneling option to be used, which is going to make our code start executing. And this is how the code is going to look like. And once we have everything in place, we can now run the same test from our local machine, and it's going to start using the locally hosted application within the LambdaTest platform. So I'm just going to change the name of our test from parallel browser testing to parallel browser testing local, so that we can differentiate that they are actually running the local tests. And then I'm just gonna right click and run these tests this time. So once I do that, instantly LambdaTest is super smart enough to show us the new test starting to pop in. And we can see that we have the parallel browser testing local coming in for us. And it's running 2 tests in parallel. And if we open them, you could see that it is starting to run the tests for us. And if we see our local application over here, you could see the requests are actually coming in. And these requests are actually coming in from the LambdaTest platform for us, because the LambdaTest platform is actually running the real application for its testing purposes. And if we see the new data to be loaded, you could see that all the tests are actually executed. And if I open any of the test and if I play the video of how the test is being executed, you could see that the URL is 127.0.0.1:8080/todo.html, which means it is actually using our locally hosted application to run the test within the LambdaTest platform. And the same is actually happening multiple different operating systems and multiple different browsers. So this shows that tunneling is actually working much easily to run our tests on LambdaTest platform using a simple code change within our MSTest code using Selenium C#. So that's about all the discussion that we discussed about LambdaTest platform and Selenium C# and MSTest framework. Hope you really liked this whole series, and also hope you really enjoyed using the LambdaTest platform for using and extending the capability of Selenium test in multiple different browsers, in multiple different operating systems, and multiple different versions of browsers, making the testing much easier and realistic.